Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you Monday to Friday live on CGTN. The state of the Chinese economy always occupies the front page of international media, particularly when China-U.S. trade negotiations are underway. Let's take a look at some of the numbers to gauge how well the Chinese economy is doing recently. The Chinese Commerce Ministry released the consumption data early this week. These numbers show how much the Chinese have been spending when celebrating the Lunar New Year, the most important holiday of the year. From last Monday to Sunday, nationwide sales of all retail and catering businesses were a little over $1 trillion yuan. That is about 150 billion US dollars. It was up 8.5% year on year. Looking back, a new record has been set every year since 2017, when sales exceeded 800 billion yuan, then over 900 billion in 2018, and over $1 trillion this year. Chinese consumers spend more on high-quality products, with sales of organic food, smart home appliances, and new electronic devices rising. Many believe these numbers indicate the strong spending power of Chinese consumers, although the country's growth rate has slowed a bit. But what exactly is the state of the Chinese economy? Earlier, I asked Jin Keyu, a young Chinese economist and associate professor from the London School of Economics. Let's hear what she had to say. You've been, I have to say, Keyu, very active on the international stage, helping others to understand China's logic as you see it, and also writing about articles on different platforms, talking about your views of the Chinese policies. But, you know, sometimes it's a balance in a way for an economist about what to explain, how to explain it, and how to make sure that both sides will be able to understand exactly your message. I wonder, walking on that tightrope, how are you balance your different sides of the stories?
As an academic, the priority is intellectual honesty, and that is why I'm in this business. I think that numbers say a million things. You don't have to argue with the outsiders, the Western perceptions, the Western criticizers of the Chinese economy, political economy, if you show them the numbers. And this is what much of the research is about. But even looking at the numbers, a lot of this misperception from the outside is unfounded. And that's where I want to come in and correct. But of course, you know, numbers don't tell everything. There's also the ethos, there's the cultural element.
And there's also the issue to the numbers sometimes.
Of course, and there's a frame of mind. But with my academic training and economic training, that framework, that ability to communicate with the West is also important. And I think the West is much more open to receiving the truth about the Chinese political economy if you can communicate with them in a language that they understand.
Well, in a language they understand, well, that's probably true. But some would argue at a time when the Chinese economy is really taking off, becoming the second largest in the world, purchasing power, the #1 in the world, pictures might be different. Whether there is a genuine motivation to try to understand what's really going on inside China, from your perspective, is that a fair assessment?
The question is, it's not only can they understand, but do they want to understand?
Right. Do they really want to understand?
Yes. We need to understand that there are many layers to the complex system of America and Europe. There's the government and there's the people and the businessmen. I think that there's substantial interest going forward still for American businessmen with this financial liberalization to engage in China on so many fronts, and they want to learn more. They want to understand what exactly underpins this enigmatic and powerful and very successful, remarkable country. They want to understand more of that, but I think that what we're seeing in terms of the trade disputes is this lack of willingness to see the other side. And I think that is very dangerous, because often it's misperceptions that cause great conflict if we look back into history.
But my training in journalism, Keyu, made me think the other way around. And I have to ask you about that. That is, what about China? Is the speed and the efficiency implementation of the reform measures China put out to the world really being done in the way it promised?
Reforms have been done and accelerated after China joined the WTO. We must recognize that and understand that when there is a unified political will, and sometimes it's caused by external shocks like trade conflict with the U.S., sometimes it's pushed through more efficiently. However, we have to also look into the internal problems as well. Is the, let's say, environment suitable for reforms? Do people have motivation to really take radical decisions? Because ultimately the reforms need people to push them through. Where are the people? Are they going to have that kind of incentive? Do we have a kind of personnel selection mechanism that rewards people with vision, with execution skills, ready to stick their neck out there to take some risk? And I think that is as much a challenge to why we're not seeing reforms as many of the other things that are considered.
But are there any signs telling you that we are really breaking this cycle, going to something totally different, or at least somewhat different?
Reforms are always difficult.
I know you would say that, Keyu. I know you would say that.
But
okay.
I have a but.
Okay.
External pressure from the U.S. The unintended consequence of that is it's pushing through. We're actually accelerating some of the much needed reforms. And opening up financial services, which of course was already on the agenda, but it really has been accelerated, and I think they're opening up in much larger scale. Here, inviting in new blood, new financial institutions from the foreign economies will bring more competition, will open up financial services for firms and for households, and I think that will be one sign of improvement, but it takes time, right?
Okay, here's the question. I mean, globalization, when you see the earlier rounds, people realize there's a place for them, and therefore they try to train themselves, make everything ready, and get themselves into that global supply chain. And it works somewhat perfectly. And now you see a lot of dissentment in the air, dissatisfaction. So the change means unpredictability. The change also means maybe lose before gain. So here's the question to an economist. What is the most efficient and the best way to do change?
One of my favorite quotes is, we must change to remain the same, which means we need to make progress in order to maintain our living standards. And this is very much the question of today. And it is not just trade that has brought about changes, but really even more importantly, technology. And technological development has displaced many workers and has kept a middle income stagnant in many parts of the advanced economies. And I think China has embraced change in a very, let's say, at least economics speaking, efficient way. You can see that the skill transfers, the adoption of new skills and transfers, across jobs have been much smoother than in other countries, and that has to continue. But what is underlying China is that there is expectations for tomorrow. Unlike the West, there's diminished expectations for the next generation. Chinese people are hopeful that there will be better life tomorrow, so they're willing to invest in human capital. They're willing to take up new jobs. They are an industrious people, but we need also government policies that will help the transition and labor flows across sectors. So we need to be prepared for the fundamental, transitions that we're about to witness.
But you see, with these different rounds of trade disputes, that complaints are more about the external area rather than how should we train ourselves, how can we get a better job internally. That I don't think is going to disappear. So as an economist, how do you see contagiousness of that for our world's economy? And as a young economist, you know your peers very well, those who need to have a better future. What do you think can be the solution?
There is a lot of political undertone, because with trade it's us against them, and let's find a common factor to blame our domestic issues. Whereas if it's technology, who are we going to blame? Us against robots? No one's going to blame the robots, right?
So let's find an easy target.
Exactly, China as one example. I think that human capital is really still the answer, no matter how much we have talked about. With this kind of transition into higher tech, higher skill, a new economy-driven growth model, skill is actually the one that's most lacking. A very interesting fact is if we look at even the developed world, first of all, we see that the skill premium has risen a lot, and that's contributing to the income inequality. But one of the key reasons behind the rise in skill premium is that skill demand has increased, but the supply of skilled labor has not increased as much. And that is, of course, very surprising given that we hear so much about higher education and this and that. But actually, demand has outstripped supply, which means that we need to increase still the supply of skilled labor.
And the right type of supply of labor.
It has to be, it doesn't matter if you went to college if you don't have the right skills.
Stay with us here on World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program.